meetings, you know. Clay always says, you know, if he doesn't tell them how to grow the grapes, they don't tell him how to make the wine, they get on really, really well. So, but Emma's always put in the middle, and you know, she's obviously going to tell you about our cemetery vineyard Zinfandel. So we make 7 rock pile zins. So this is just one of them that's in the glass room.
Does anyone need a top up while we're enjoying it?
There's the group here, man.
Yeah. There's about 30 of us.
Okay. Thanks. So as just to kind of complement what Carrie was saying in particular about how special the rock pile appellation is, so we're one of the youngest appellations in California, so created in 2002. However, the Mauritson family, like she was saying, has been growing grapes here since the late 1800s. Another, besides the presence of Lake Sonoma, which is about 2,200 square feet of surface and 200 feet in depth, so it's very, very cold, and when that warmish air comes off the Pacific Ocean, you know, pulls down the fog, and varietals like Zinfandel that are really thin, bigger berry, tend to have tighter clusters, more prone to rot, excel up here because we're above that inversion layer. In addition, I'm sure you know, it feels great being in the sun, but you notice that constant breeze. In natural elevation, you get 3 to 5 always mile per hour breezes, but sometimes kicks up to 15 plus compared to the valley floor. And also what's great about elevation too is very, very shallow soils. So, you know, the name rock pile just didn't come out of thin air. A lot of the Pomo tribes actually refer to this place as a place of rocks. And that's where, I'll get into where the cemetery name comes from. So shallow soils, higher elevation, more wind, and which creates smaller berries because it controls the canopy, because it's getting a little bit nerdy. The stomata close, the photosynthesis shuts down, and we get smaller canopies up here, smaller berries, more concentration. In addition, we have very limited water. A lot of these vineyards up here are actually dry farmed. The vineyard in front of you hasn't been irrigated for over 6 years. There's other vineyards that have been they've been growing up here for over 12 years that haven't seen a drop of water since their infancy. And so obviously, when we're looking at drought years, we're fortunate enough that these vines have already been grown in soils that don't provide a lot of water to begin with.
Do you have any idea how deep the roots go?
Well, our topsoil is about 12 inches. So then you start hitting rock layers and so forth. So we actually haven't had the opportunity to like officially dig down, but probably they go anywhere from 24 to 36, but they're going to be struggling at that point. I mean, also, you know, please, you know, we don't want to be professors up here who have put tape on your mouths. You know, please make sure that if you have any questions, you let us know. We want for this to be more interactive. So what you're enjoying now is our 2013 Cemetery Zen, and the name actually comes from, you know, up here when you can imagine that there is no houses to reference, there is no bridges, there is no lakes. A lot of the times the family would say, hey, have you seen the cows or the sheep that they used to raise up here in the buck pasture? And the buck pasture is actually the vineyard right behind you, because that's where often you'd see the bucks. Another vineyard that we make Zinfandel from is Madrone Springs, and so you'd say, hey, did you see the cows over in the Madrone Springs area? So all of the vineyard names actually comes from references of when there was no other landmarks here. And so cemetery actually comes from, not from the interns that we've worked to death during harvest and buried them, but actually from a collection of rocks that look like tombstone heads. And so the reference was, hey, have you seen the sheep in the cemetery area? And so that's where all these great names come from. We have Jack's Cabin that actually references a gentleman that used to be an outlaw, and his cabin when he was hiding up here is down below. That's originally where we were going to go before that wonderful rain that we're all thanking. Yeah, we're all thanking Mother Nature for it came yesterday. So growing Zinfandel up here, like I said, the appellation really allows us to grow fantastic Zinfandels within actually a pretty small area. So even though that this appellation is 15,000 acres, only probably about, we're going to max out a little over 300 because of land ordinances that just recently passed about planting at high elevation and on slopes. But what allows us to have 7 unique different Zinfandel vineyards is, as you can see, like, look at all the different slopes and aspects. You know, when you go on top of a mountain, you don't have flat land. You actually plant on the slopes. So a lot of the vineyards here are planted southwesterly or northeasterly to really capture as much sunlight as possible. And if you were to walk, like for example, if it's noon and you're out here looking at the vineyard and you walk around the corner and we'll see the Madrone Springs Vineyard when we get up to the top in the cemetery, it's about 10 degrees cooler and the sun comes up 2 to 3 hours later than this particular vineyard. And so it's nice that we get more dried herbal, dried fruit from a vineyard that's planted more southwesterly facing to our vineyards like Cemetery and Madrone Springs that's more northeasterly facing, and you get more earthy and blue fruit. So that's what allows us to have 7 single vineyards from such a small appellation. And then we also have some vineyards over on the other side of Pritchard Peaks that is completely easterly facing. Very different profile, and I'll let Carol and Kareth talk a little bit more about that. Just to kind of highlight how we make our wine, we typically harvest our Zin anywhere from 25 to 26 bricks. I mean, we're not going to lie, we're not making Pinot in Burgundy, we're making Zin in California. And everyone knows how the cluster morphology is so uneven in Zin. In one cluster you'll have a super ripe berry, you'll have a pink berry, and sometimes those little damn hens and chicks are unpollinated berries that, especially 2015 vintage, really came around to fruition. And we typically whole berry fermentation, beginning with pump overs to really try to stimulate more of a carbonic effect in the beginning, and then with tannin extraction through punch downs, we are on the skins anywhere from 12 to 16 days, depending on extraction.
You don't do like whole cluster or whole berry?
We do whole berry, but not whole cluster. We sometimes feel like whole cluster can kind of overwhelm the natural terroir from the stem inclusion. And then we age our Zins about 14 months in new oak. So our 2014 version of Cemetery will be bottled next month. We're anywhere from 25 to 35% new French oak. A lot of that has to do with tasting the wine continuously throughout the winemaking process, and then if we feel like the wine can handle a little bit more new oak, we'll add a little bit more new oak. If we have to pull it out, then we'll pull it out. Does anyone have any questions?
The wines are all made the same way, but they're from 7 different vineyards.
Yeah.
Are they the same clones in each vineyard?
No, we work with 3 different clones. So Peak clone, St. Peter's Church, and Mazzoni. 4 clones and Duprat.
So if we had them laid out, the 7 wines taste very different because of the different aspects.
Yeah, and of course, clonal influence is part of that too. Yeah. And so the Cemetery is actually the St. Peter's Church clone, which to me tends to be really fruit driven. And so that's where you get a lot of that blue fruit. And then it's planted on 110R rootstock, just because, like I said, we don't have a lot of water up here, so that's a drought tolerant rootstock. Okay, great. So there is going to be a test. I see a lot of nodding heads.
Could you talk? There's an area of about, I think it's less than 3,000 acres where Rockpile and Dry Creek overlap. Is that in vineyard area or purely in geography?
There's actually, the appellation ends, I think, right as we get to the top of the hill right there. So there's a little bit of overlap right in this area.
It's actually 2,500
Okay.
acres.
Sorry, excuse me.
And sorry, just to kind of.
Sorry.
But it's actually
okay,
a lot of the vineyard is in Dry
Dry
Creek
Creek, okay.
and Rockpile.
And
So I
how
would say it's
you-
up
how
near
would
Westfall.
you-
Oh, okay, wow, that
How
far.
would you
Okay.
label the wines if you were less than 85% of that fruit in one versus the other? Would it simply be Sonoma County at that point, or would you separate it as such that you wouldn't have to worry about that?
We use some Rockpile in our Dry Creek Zin, because it's still Dry Creek, but then our rock piles, I mean, these are definitely
Yeah, 100% rock pile.
100% rock piles.
Yeah.
So these are also vineyard designates too.
Okay.
So
That wasn't a catch question. I
yeah,
was just
Yeah.
no, but it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. No, actually, our Dry Creek Zin will blend anywhere from 5 to 15% of rock pile, just to give it, we don't want to overwhelm the natural Dry Creek character of Zin, but to give it a little bit more structure. I always consider rock pile Zins like the Cabernets of Zins. They have a lot more structure and acid and oomph that you typically think of maybe a Russian River or Sonoma Valley.
A question.
Hey,
When you guys applied for the ABA, was that a battle? Was it quick? Was it difficult?
I can tell that story.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you.
Carol Shelton will be moving to her wine next week.
And you guys have it in the back there? You have my wine there.
Oh, yeah, do we need to pour it?
Carol's wine. No,
Yeah.
there's 2 bottles over there.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
So
2
you
bottles.
might want to switch out your glass, right?
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah, you
so
guys are welcome to just throw it back in
Or you
the.
make your own.
yeah. Actually, I'm the only one allowed to blend with my language. Not so much. Okay, they're gonna come around and get you some.
Hello, Carol.
Hey, how you doing? Welcome. Yeah, everyone's